American air power has followed the global pattern of modern warfare into virtually every corner of the world. Today, 15 separate air forces, supported by equally important service and training commands, are in operation in 10 theaters of war and the continental United States. These air forces cover an operating area of some 19 million square miles, about 1/10 of the surface of the globe. In the Southwest Pacific area, the 5th Air Force is playing an important role in softening up the Japanese for the campaigns which are ahead. The personnel strength of this Air Force is about 110,000. It has over 2,000 airplanes. In an average week, over 3,000 sorties are carried out against the Japs. And during an average week, the Japs field the destruction of over 1,100 tons of bombs dropped by 5th Air Force planes. This Jap fighter fell victim to the guns of a P-38. Thousands of others have either been shot down or destroyed on the ground. Statistics show that for every plane we lose, the Japs are losing 6. These B-25s are carrying out low-level strafing operations against Jap surface vessels and a Jap-held airfield. Parafrag and delayed action bombs are dropped on the airfield and the dispersal areas. "3,000 sorties and 1,100 tons of bombs per week. These rates measure the current intensity of 5th Air Force operations. From bases in Great Britain, the 8th and 9th Air Forces are stepping up both strategic and tactical operations against Germany. These air forces have a personnel strength of over 350,000. Their airplanes number over 7,000. Typical of current operations are days on which 2,000 bombers and fighters, dropping over 2,000 tons of bombs, are dispatched against Germany. Missions of this size are being executed with increasing regularity and are now averaging 1 every 3 days. German fighters attempting to intercept the heavy bomber attack are shot down by P-47s. We suffer losses in these attacks too, but for every plane we lose, the Germans are losing 3. Today, from these fronts all over the world, a series of flight paths lead back to the nerve center of all AAF operations, the continental United States. Here is the home base in December 1943. Each point on this map represents some kind of AAF activity: a training field, a technical school, a supply depot, a modification center, all of the elements which must be combined into an Air Force building and fighting on a worldwide pattern. But operations on such a scale as this have not been an overnight development. To review the story of the AAF growth, let's turn back the calendar to June 1939.
3.5 years ago, the Army Air Corps, as it was then called, was operating on a much smaller scale. We had a total of 36 fields and bases in this country and 4 in other parts of the world. Our Air Corps personnel was approaching 25,000, of which about 2,600 were officers. We had some 2,400 planes, about half of which were combat types. Less than 1% of these combat ships were heavy bombers. As for our training program, there were 367 pilots in training at Kelly and Randolph fields. There were 3 technical schools with 129 men under instruction. Our expansion plan called for 25 combat groups. In June 1939, we had 10 of the 25, and our plan called for 5 heavy bomb groups and 9 fighter groups. Our first concern was hemisphere defense, and fighters were of prime importance. Appropriations amounting to $243 million were approved to carry on operations during the remainder of the fiscal year ending June 30th, 1940. This was the brief beginning of our Air Force expansion program. About this time, the RAF had just been voted appropriations of $1,300 million.
Air forces of other world powers provided some rather impressive figures.
The Germans had 8,000 first-line planes. Japan had 4,000. Great Britain, 3,900. Italy, 3,000. France, 2,000. The United States strength at this time was 1,200 combat-type planes.
Meanwhile, in every capital of Europe, there was the swift unfolding of as big a crisis threat of war could make. Then, when von Ribbentrop flew to Moscow to sign a non-aggression pact with Russia, it was as though a bomb had exploded. Now the democracies could wait, plan, answer, and defend, but they could not come through with an action for peace as inspired as Hitler's action for war. While the cauldron boiled in Europe, the Army Air Corps celebrated its 30th birthday. It was announced that a Boeing B-17 had just hurtled from coast to coast in 9.25 hours, an average of almost 260 miles an hour. Friday, September 1st, 1939, a German plane dropped its bombs on Puck, a tiny Polish fishing village. Words were ended. Only acts remained. War had begun. First Great Britain, then France declared war on a German army which had been preparing for it for almost 10 years. Through this first great German aerial blitz against Poland, the American aviation scene was beginning to change.
Our relative standing with the other nations of the world hadn't changed much. Our plane strength of 2,546 had only increased 24 a month during the last 6 months of 1939. and 144 planes weren't a lot to add to our total. But orders had been placed for 1,000 military aircraft, the largest peacetime orders in the history of U.S. aviation. And by the end of 1939, Air Corps personnel had increased to 43,000. The Air Corps had now taken over and expanded existing civilian flying and mechanical schools and had organized others as a foundation for the needed expansion of its training facilities.
In April 1940, with rains and fog providing a protective curtain, the Germans landed troops in Denmark. Then Norway. In May, it was Holland. Then Belgium. The mighty German war machine moved on into France. The campaign of the lowlands was climaxed by the dramatic Allied evacuation at Dunkirk.
As the democracies of the world mourned the death of France, the Army Air Corps received appropriations for expansion totaling $692 million. And in September of 1940, another $1.5 billion was voted to be spent during the fiscal year ending June 30th, 1941. This last appropriation was almost as large as the total amount of money appropriated for Army aviation during its first 33 years.
September 1940 brought about the British-American exchange of island bases for overage destroyers. The Selective Service Act was passed, and the Air Corps was now assured of a continuous source of trainees. And on September 27, 1940, Japan joined the Axis.
More important were signs that the Army Air Corps was beginning to put on weight and muscle. By this time, the total personnel had increased to almost 75,000. Our plane strength had increased 1,000 in the past 14 months, bringing the total to over 3,400. About 1/3 of these were combat types. In November 1940, the Army Air Corps revised its program upward from 25 to 54 combat groups, the first aviation objective. Actually, we had 31 groups at that time. The new program called for 14 heavy bomb groups and 24 fighter groups, as the Air Corps began to expand sufficiently to consider limited offensive as well as defensive operations.
At year-end 1940, the Germans totaled up their activities and found they had dropped almost 43,000 tons of bombs on England since August of that year. About 10 tons for every ton the RAF was dropping on them.
By By May 1941, Air Corps personnel had reached 152,000 and was increasing at a rate of 10,000 a month. We were increasing our plane strength at a rate of 600 a month, and the total now stood at over 6,000. The fulfillment of the 54 Combat Group program was a goal which drew closer with each month that passed. In addition, our training programs were now swinging into stride to produce the vitally needed specialists. The flying training program had over 7,000 students under instruction, of which about 6,900 were pilots. Two, we were beginning to specialize in the training of navigators and bombardiers, with 228 of them under instruction. There were almost 22,000 students in the various stages of the technical training program.
On June 22nd, 1941, the German armies moved against their former pact partner, Russia.
Also in June, the Air Corps received $4 1/3 billion for the fiscal year 1942. This had been preceded by another $1 1/2 billion voted in April to complete the fiscal year of 1941. The overall total for 1941 had been almost $4 billion. Together, these appropriations made a grand total of $8 1/2 billion, which the Air Corps had received from June 1939 to June 1941. In August 1941, the second aviation objective replaced the first, and operations were scaled to meet the demands of 84 combat groups. We actually had 59 groups, and our new objective would, for the first time, give heavy bombers and fighters equal planning emphasis. We were to have 24 groups of each. The end of November 1941 saw the personnel strength of the Air Corps hit 297,000. 25,000 of this total were stationed at bases outside the continental U.S. Under instruction in the flying training program were over 13,500 students, including over 12,000 pilots and some 800 bombardiers, navigators, and flexible gunners. Almost 30,000 students were under instruction in the network of technical training schools across the country. We now had 96 bases and stations, and 41 more had been authorized or were under construction. Our plane strength was almost 11,000, but only 3,000 of this total were combat types, and less than 1,200 of these were suitable for immediate action measured by standards at that time. About 525 of these first-line combat planes were located in the Pacific area.
That's the record to December 7th. In the first few weeks of war, over 350 of the 525 combat planes we had in the Pacific area were destroyed. Over 1/4 of our total combat strength was lost. We suddenly found ourselves engaged in a mortal struggle with an enemy who could be counted on for nothing except bitter and fanatic opposition. On December 8th, the President asked Congress to declare,
"A state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire."
Then, 3 days later, war was declared on Germany and Italy.
January 1942 was our first full month at war. Before the month was up, $10 billion had been added to the funds available for the expansion of the Air Corps. By April, another $9 billion had been added, which brought the total for the fiscal year 1942 to $23 billion. and additional billions were to be made available as needed to build ours into the most powerful Air Force in the world. We had the funds. Now the problem was one of planning and executing.
In this first month of 1942, the Air Corps faced three tremendous jobs which had to be done immediately. Time was the one thing we didn't have. The first job, fighting a war. Second, sharing our airplane production with our allies. Third, expanding on a gigantic scale.
What problems were involved in this expansion?
The number of combat groups was one of the first problems. How many heavy bomber groups? How many fighters? Troop carrier? How many and what kind of supporting units, such as service groups, air depot groups, repair squadrons would be needed? And consideration of the different types of combat groups was only a small part of the problem. The Air Forces have some 800 different kinds of supporting units. It had to be determined when each individual unit was to be activated, and a plan had to be projected showing where each individual unit was to go, in what theater it would be needed. And each unit had to have a table of organization showing how many men it should have, what job each man was to do, and what rating each man should hold.
How about personnel to man these units?
Coming through induction centers were men with every imaginable type of experience. These men had to be fitted into one of over 1,000 different types of jobs in the Air Forces. Peacetime jobs don't coincide too closely with the functions of war, so most of these men had to be trained. Training courses had to be established, instructors selected. How long does it take to train a man in a particular job? We were in a hurry, but thoroughness was all important. Training facilities were not available, so they had to be built. Buildings, training fields, barracks. Obviously, sites had to be selected first, contracts let, construction time allowed, and speed was essential. The length of training courses was a vital factor. Men had to be started in training soon enough so they would be fully trained when they were needed. It takes almost 2 years from the time a potential pilot is inducted until he's ready to participate in a combat mission. It's 89 weeks for a navigator, 89 weeks for a bombardier, 39 weeks for a gunner. The time to train factor alone makes planning 2 years or more in advance necessary. And training these men as combat teams was another problem. How many men should be trained for each type of job? Some types require over 100,000 men, others less than 100. The number of men who could be expected to wash out in certain courses had to be considered, and the enrollment increased accordingly. Attrition had to be considered, as did the returning to this country of men who had served their tour of duty in a war theater. The length of this tour of duty had to be decided. Men's lives hung on these decisions. These are only a few of the personnel problems. All the men, yes, and the WWIIs too, who are playing a very important role in the Air Forces, had to be housed, fed, clothed, and trained. Hospitals and adequate medical care were essential. Huge stores of food were necessary. Arrangements had to be made to pay each man, insure him, and yes, entertain him too.
What problems were involved in the airplane picture?
Airplane production had to be planned by type, model, and series. It had to be determined when these planes were needed and where. This involved consideration of over 450 different kinds of airplanes. The number of airplanes needed required analysis of the percentage which would be grounded for repair, modification, and other causes. In the average theater, over 40% of the total planes are grounded at all times. An appropriate reserve also had to be planned. Losses had to be anticipated. Replacements must be made, and the time required to produce an airplane makes anticipation of our losses essential. The length of time required to send a replacement plane to a given theater is an important factor. We could only plan on about 50% of this country's productive capacity in placing orders for airplanes. The other 50% was going to the Navy or to our allies.
What about the problem of spare parts?
An adequate stock of spare parts speeds repair work and keeps planes flying. Overstocks mean critical materials wasted, stockroom space wasted, and man-hours lost. Decisions had to be made as to what kinds of spare parts, for what type, model, and series of airplanes should be stocked in each individual stockroom. Yes, and when.
What about equipment and supplies?
Each individual unit of the Air Forces had to have a table of equipment, setting forth in detail just what items it would need. And the individual items of equipment which had to be covered numbered over 500,000 and varied from a nut or bolt to a multi-ton truck. The quantities of each of these items had to be determined and orders placed.
How about bombs?
Some 18 different types, varying from a 2,000-pound general-purpose bomb to a 4-pound incendiary. The types needed for different targets was a big factor. The number of each type had to be decided and orders placed soon enough to ensure that our bombers would have enough of the right kind of bombs to drop on a given target at the right time. And gasoline. A heavy bomber in the United Kingdom averages some 240 gallons per hour of flight. A fighter in India will use about 50 gallons per hour. In 3 months of 1943, over 100 million gallons of gasoline were consumed by overseas units. This is high-octane aviation fuel. Again, decision had to be made as to how much would be needed, when and in what theater. Facilities to produce this gasoline had to be built. Transportation was another problem. Not only the gasoline, but the men, the planes, the equipment, the supplies, the spare parts, the bombs, all had to be moved within this country and, more important, overseas. These are just a few of the problems involved in the expansion of our air forces, but they all had to be solved.
February 1942 brought the latest revision of the combat group program. This time it was upward from 84 to 115. We actually had 71 groups, and now for the first time, heavy bomb groups were to outnumber fighter groups. It was to be 34 to 30.
In March, the complete streamlining of the United States Army created the Army Air Forces with General Arnold in command. In June 1942, a smashing defeat from the sky was dealt the Japanese fleet in the Battle of Midway. Army Air Force planes joined United States naval forces in the decisive repulse of an enemy task force bent upon seizing Midway and Hawaii as a prelude to the invasion of our west coast. Air power played a decisive role in turning back this seaborne enemy force. But a full understanding of the importance of winning this battle comes only with the realization of the disastrous consequences which might well have followed its loss.
Signs of rapid expansion were evident in June 1942 when the total personnel assigned to the Air Forces had jumped upward to well over 750,000. Our total aircraft was now almost 22,000.
In June, Hitler's fortress Europe rocked under the terrific pounding of RAF bombers. Cologne and Essen were among the first on the list of vital German industrial targets scheduled for destruction. The first all-American raid was in the air on August 17th. A formation of 18 B-17s was on its way to attack Rouen. British Spitfires provided fighter cover for our planes. Over the target, Nazi fighters attempt to intercept the bombers and are driven off by the Spitfires. Their mission completed, the bombers return to their base.
At home, the combat group plan was revised for the second time in 3 months. To follow up the 224 figure established in July, a new objective of 273 groups was set. That September, we actually had 109 groups. Of outstanding interest was the fact that this newest plan called for 104 heavy bomb groups and 90 fighter groups. Clearly, future planning was concerned a great deal with the offensive punch which the heavy bombers could deliver.
The African campaign furnished full proof of the terrific wallop packed by the heavy bomber. American B-24s, which the British fondly called pink pigs because of their desert camouflage, and B-25s were joining the RAF in hammering at Axis supply depots, trucks, mobile guns, and tanks. By early November, Rommel was in full retreat across the top of Africa. While the air forces were operating in coordination with the ground forces in this full-scale campaign, in other parts of the world, other men and other planes were carrying out missions to clear the skies, to soften up the enemy for future attacks. 1943. This is the year our aerial superiority was clearly established. This is the year that combat operations swung into full stride. Yes, Italy, Germany, and Japan can attest to that.
First quarter. American Air Force's planes flew more sorties in this quarter in just 3 months than they did in all of our previous war activity. They dropped more bombs from January through March than they did from Pearl Harbor to the end of 1942. Our personnel was now in excess of 2 million, and it had been increasing at a rate of 150,000 a month during this first quarter. In the matter of aircraft strength, our total figure as of March 31st, 1943, was almost 43,000, and we were adding to this at a rate of about 2,700 planes a month net. Our combat losses of 381 planes, compared to the Axis losses of 1,206, showed a ratio in our favor of a little better than 3 to 1, not to mention 459 enemy planes probably lost. The training picture at the close of this first quarter showed new peaks of activity. There were over 98,000 men under instruction in the flying training program, including over 72,000 pilots and almost 8,000 each of bombardiers, navigators, and gunners. Technical training now had 185,000 students under instruction.
At 15:15, March 1st, 1943, a lone B-24 of the 321st Heavy Bomber Squadron sighted a Jap convoy in the Bismarck Sea. Whatever the mission of that convoy, it was never completed. Our air power saw to that. As important as this smashing defeat handed the Japs was the fact that the skip bombing technique, used for the first time on such a scale, proved to be an effective method of destroying enemy ships. In May, the island of Pantelleria became the target for our bombers. The first mission over this target was flown on May 8th at noon. 33 medium bombers dropped 43 tons of explosives. "34 days later, on June 11th, after almost 6,000 tons of bombs had been dropped by our planes, Pantelleria surrendered. 13 American aircraft were lost.
Second quarter. The number of sorties flown in this quarter was more than double the total in the year's first quarter. The bomb tonnage dropped was 2.5 times as great. While offensive activity was doubling itself in intensity, the personnel picture in the Air Forces was starting to level off toward the completion of the 273 combat group plan. The actual strength was about 2,200,000. Our total aircraft inventory was, for the first time, in excess of 50,000 planes. In the matter of combat losses, our quarterly tally was 507, as compared to the enemy's 2,352, an advantage now for us of better than 4.5 to 1. In addition, 700 enemy planes were listed as probably lost.
In August, the sorties against Germany had begun to follow a round-the-clock schedule. The RAF was hitting with all its power and area bombing attacks at night. The AAF was concentrating on daylight precision raids. The raid on Ploiești installations in the heart of the Romanian oil fields was a high point during this month. Our losses were high, but the destruction spread by these B-24s was a serious blow to Germany's vital fuel supply. Italy surrendered in September, and our task in Europe was one step nearer completion.
Third quarter. AAF activity in the third quarter again surpassed all previous records for intensity. The number of sorties was about 80% more than the second quarter. The tonnage of bombs dropped was more than twice that of the previous quarter. Personnel strength had now risen to over 2,300,000, and we had almost 57,000 planes on hand. In this quarter, our combat losses totaled 850, against 3,871 enemy certains and 873 probables, an advantage in certain losses of over 4.5 to 1. It was 6 to 1 against the Japs.
As the final 3 months of 1943 began to roll off the calendar, air marks were hung up every day. The first week in October, the 8th Air Force had over 1,000 each of heavy bombers and fighters. There were now more than 1,000 B-24s outside the continental United States. The P-47 was now our most numerous fighter plane. On October 8th, 855 planes left Great Britain for a raid on Bremen and Begesek. The effort and planning necessary to accomplish a mission of this size can hardly be realized simply in the number of planes involved. The planes flew a distance of at least 850,000 miles and traveled over 1,400 miles just on the ground in takeoffs, landings, and taxiing. They used almost 1 million gallons of gasoline and 25,000 gallons of oil. They were loaded with 2.5 million pounds of bombs, 2.75 million rounds of ammunition, and perhaps 800 pounds of maps. More than 5,000 crew members were over enemy territory for periods of from 2 to 6 hours. In October, United States production went over 8,000 planes per month. We were producing 1,000 heavy bombers per month for the first time. Also, a rate of 50,000 sorties per month was reached in October. In November, 1 million crossings over enemy lines had been made by Air Force crew members. In December, the Air Forces were dropping over 1 ton of bombs per minute of daylight on the enemy. At the end of December 1943, the Air Forces could look back on a year of tremendous activity, on a year which provided unmistakable trends of increasing intensity and strength.
In the first half of the year, the Air Forces performed 104,000 sorties. Almost 2.5 times as many were performed in the second half. We dropped 46,000 tons of bombs during the first half of the year. For the second half, it was almost 3 times as many. Our combat losses during the first half total less than 900. The Axis lost over 3,500. We lost 1,700 planes during the second half, more than the first, yes, but the Axis lost almost 7,800. Their losses increased over 5 times as much as ours. At year end, our personnel strength stood at about 2,400,000. Our airplane strength had risen to over 65,000. Yes, the trends are unmistakable.
In the months ahead, offensive actions are destined to become so sweeping and so intensive in all theaters that statistics will double and redouble. In 1944, planned operations call for 1.5 million sorties against the enemy. That's 3.5 times the number flown in 1943. Our planes will drop 700,000 tons of bombs on enemy targets in 1944. That's 3.5 times the destruction they dropped in 1943. And in 1944, about 6 million crossings over enemy lines will be made by Air Forces crew members. That's 5 times the total number of crew members who have flown offensive missions during the last 2 years we've been at war. The middle of the year will see 2 tons of bombs per minute of daylight being dropped on our enemies. In the fiscal year 1945, the Air Forces will amass a total of 60 million flying hours. This means that Army Air Forces planes will fly over 164,000 hours each day throughout the year. Yes, Berlin and Tokyo have a lot to look forward to.
The picture you are about to see was taken from Air Force Combat Film Digest. It tells a story of the vital contribution made by the Army Air Forces to victory in the Pacific. Since December 7th, 1941, the world has decreased in size and its shape has been considerably altered. This phenomena, which has brought disaster to our enemies, will remain as a lasting tribute to the skill of American aviation, its workers, and the personnel of the Army Air Forces. In less than 4 years, the distance around the world has been spanned thousands upon thousands of times. Places that were once obscure specks on the map have become bywords in every home in the land as they were bombed, rebombed, and blasted out of existence until victory was won. The Army Air Forces played an important part in winning the war. It is equally important to ensure our winning the peace that America remain what it is today, the leading air power in the world. You and every American can play your part in maintaining the freedom and security for which we have all fought by buying and holding bonds.
War comes to Japan, Leh, Salamaua, New Guinea.
We start for Tokyo.
The Aleutian Islands.
We start from another direction.
China, where there was never enough of anything to fight with, except Japs.
We kept trying.
Just another one of 100 blobs of land to retake in the Pacific. Wake Island.
We got it back.
Burma, penetrated by the airborne infantry of every nation.
Practically nothing stopped us.
On the road to the Philippines, Hollandia. Obscure names on the map of the world that were blasted out of existence.
And for every bomb, every bullet, and every dead Jap, we paid.
We paid for a global war under conditions that hardly seem possible now. We paid with endless supplies and materiel. And our men fought and sweated and labored endlessly to advance the bomber line. That was the watchword in the Pacific. To advance the bomber line.
To advance the bomber line to Tokyo. Not just from the dank malarial-infested jungles, but from the ice and snow and solitude of the north. Advance the bomber line. Get the planes in the air. Destroy the Japs.
American supplies from a nation mobilized for war. Supplies of every size, shape, and description. Supplies destined for China after being shipped halfway around the world. Supplies for a global war, flown to their final destination by the Army Air Forces. This was more than a fight against the Japs. It was a fight against time and the elements. But finally, all over the Pacific and the Far East, our time began to arrive.
The supply line that stretched halfway around the world served its purpose. From the airstrips that had been hacked out of the jungles, the Army Air Forces gave the infantry the one thing they lacked for so long: air-ground support. Fighter aircraft swooped down to destroy the enemy. Here in central Burma, 90 miles southwest of Mandalay, is just one example of the thousands of times that air-ground support catapulted our advances forward. In this instance, air power was used to clear the way for a push south to Rangoon and win that port for our own forces. P-47s in the 1st Air Commando Group were used to aid the British infantry to cross the Irrawaddy River and establish a beachhead. The air action ranged in a 50-mile radius. The pilots, guided by intelligence reports, were in constant communication with ground installations. They bombed and strafed everything the Japanese had so carefully installed. What would have taken months of hand-to-hand fighting and heavy casualties was accomplished in a matter of days. And even as this beachhead was consolidated, it was clear that the British-American air-ground coordination would push the Japs out of Burma.
This is an emergency hospital located 7 miles behind the front lines in northern Burma. General Stilwell watches as Chinese casualties are brought in to be treated by Lieutenant Colonel Gordon Seagrave, the famous Burma surgeon, and his staff of Army doctors and Burmese nurses. Because of the constant presence of snipers, most of the wounded were brought in during the night. They made the 7-mile trip from the front lines over jungle trails in crude man-carried litters. This base, like many others, was supplied with medical equipment and plasma by the Army Air Forces. The wounded men, after being treated, were carried an additional 14 miles to a landing strip where they were flown back to a general hospital at Lido, a trip that would take 15 days by foot. The Army Air Forces made it in 1 hour and saved the lives of countless soldiers of the United Nations who were patched, mended, and revivified by the combined miracles of modern medicine and air power.
No sooner was a new base secured in the Pacific when the same relentless, monotonous tasks began all over again. At Saipan, supplies, equipment, engineers followed in the wake of the invasion forces to make the island operational for the Army Air Forces. Work began even while the freshly wounded men were still being evacuated to Kwajalein. Just a few short days ago, these men had left Kwajalein whole and ready for battle. Now they were going back to where they had started from. The victory at Saipan had been a costly one. But the enemy had been made to pay double. Once more, the potency of air power manifested itself. One of the strongest Jap bases in the Pacific had been reduced to rubble. The Japanese warlords knew now that soon no part of the homeland would be safe.
Then began one of the miracle jobs of the Pacific. A job that had to be completed within hours of the time it was begun. To rebuild and lengthen the newly captured airstrip to accommodate the weapon that was eventually going to win the war.
It's history now how the job was accomplished. And out of the vast stretches of the Pacific roared the mightiest bomber the Army Air Forces had ever dreamed about. The B-29 Super Fortress, with the dust of the Kansas plains still embedded in the shiny silver wings. This was the bomber that was designed to carry the war directly to Japan itself. The zenith of the long-range plans for victory in the Pacific was in sight.
However, there was an obstacle in our path. It was called Iwo Jima. We needed this tiny stretch of land for many reasons. As a fighter base, as an emergency landing field for B-29s returning from missions over Japan, and also because it was filled with Japanese aircraft that had to be eliminated before we started on the road to Tokyo.
Using Iwo Jima as a base, the Japs attacked Saipan at every opportunity. And we shot them out of the sky as fast as they came over. They hit us, too. Hit men. In the painstakingly built airfield. And B-29s. Reasons enough to make the step that followed.
So, we had to take Iwo Jima, no matter what the cost was. When the smoke and the fire and agony and the dying was over, this is what was left. But Iwo Jima was ours. The fighter planes on its airstrip were ours. And the B-29s had their emergency landing field. The road to Tokyo was wide open.
Guadalcanal, New Guinea, Rabaul, and Tarawa were left behind now as the Army Air Forces began to systematically destroy vital targets of the stolen Japanese Empire. In Borneo, the valuable oil supplies at Balikpapan and surrounding vicinity were subjected to devastating aerial bombardments. These were long, dangerous missions, but they were worth it. The major supply of fuel for the Japanese war machine was destroyed, and the enemy on Borneo was softened up for the inevitable invasion that followed the heavy air attacks. The high-geared Japanese war machine was slowed down to a walk.
Even as the B-29s from Saipan began flying missions against Japan itself, other portions of the Army Air Forces were spearheading the attacks against the Philippines. Here the Japs were firmly entrenched. But here again they were made to feel and realize the potency of air power. The Japs had done a lot of damage to our bases in the Philippines in 1941. When General MacArthur said he would return, he didn't mean that he'd come empty-handed. The Army Air Forces had delivered the goods prepaid. The recapture of the Philippines and the liberation of its long-suffering people is just part of the archives now. And General Douglas MacArthur has reached his goal to avenge Bataan and Corregidor.
was still another base we paid to secure. Okinawa. On a nearby island rests one more soldier.
But Okinawa, too, was soon operational. General Doolittle arrived from the European theater and assumed command of the redeployed 8th Air Force.
The stage was set, and General Arnold, commander of the Army Air Forces, flew to a far eastern base to discuss the knockout blow with Generals Kenny and Whitehead.
The bomber line had advanced to Tokyo at last. And what a bomber line. 400 plane raids. 500. 600. 1,000. The island hopping, the naval battles, the hand-to-hand fighting of the Marines and infantry were all paying off at once. Japanese aircraft production was reduced 50% within a space of weeks. Japanese shipping was slashed to shreds, and their war plants were systematically eliminated. The superfortresses rained a constant stream of destruction and were accompanied on their missions by strong fighter escorts to protect them. Tokyo, Kobe, Nagasaki, Yokohama, Curie, and every other major city of Japan was bombed and rebombed by the B-29s. Entire cities were destroyed, while others were left smoking and paralyzed. Millions of Japanese were forced to flee. In these final days of the war, air power and air power alone was bringing a nation to its knees.
It remained for air power and air power alone to finish the job. One day, August 5th, 1945, one B-29 left on a special mission. One airplane that represented the people of the United Nations and the millions who had lost their lives. One airplane that represented millions of man-hours of labor and billions of dollars of American money. That airplane carried the atomic bomb. Its destination was Hiroshima.
A city in ruins with one bomb. This was the first test of the atomic bomb in New Mexico.
Nagasaki destroyed a few days later with a second atomic bomb, so much more powerful that the first one was already obsolete.
On August 14th, 1945, the Pacific War was over.
Japan surrendered unconditionally, simply by pressure from a distance.
That pressure was air power, the strongest air power the world had ever known. It remains for the people of the United States to keep it that way.
came that early April morning at an air base in Colorado. 40 flying fortresses line the apron. 4,000 men march out for a final inspection. They've trained long and hard for these ships, the 400 men who fly them, and the 3,600 who work to keep them flying. Now the 351st Bombardment Group is ready. By the dawn's early light, it assembles for overseas combat. You're on your way, Joe. This is it. With his staff, Colonel William A. Hatchie, Jr. looks over his 4 squadrons. You feel the old man is proud of you. He finds no fault with you today, nor you with him. You'd fly his wing to hell and gone. Sergeant Philip J. Halls, top turret gunner from Springfield, Missouri. He feels that way. So does his pal Kenny, Sergeant Kenneth L. Halls, ball turret gunner from Perkins, Oklahoma. Related? No. They think they might have been several generations ago back in Germany, but now, just 2 guys with the same uncle, Sam. Meet their pilot, Lieutenant Theodore Argyropoulos of Redding, California. Argy's brother is in the Air Corps, too. Their dad was born in Greece. Yes, the Greeks have a word for it. Fight. Their bombardier, Lieutenant Daniel F. Stevens of Chicago. He can bat 1,000 for the Norton bomb sight. Sergeant Paul J. Posty, ball turret gunner. His dad came from Italy. Paul was formerly a pastry cook. He's got 1 brother in the Navy. Another, a Marine, missing in action. Here's Sergeant Tim Tutchet, tail gunner from Mariana Lake, New Mexico. On the reservation, they named him Aki. That means boy in Navajo. Uncle Sam's boy, too. A few last-minute instructions, and we're off. The compass points northeast. Take another look down there. That's your part of the earth. Out of that desert, those mountains, those fields has grown the American way of life. What you're fighting for. You remember the Colonel's quiet words? Men, the enemy has asked for it. Let him have it. Seek no quarter, nor give any beyond reason. Be firm, be just, and Godspeed you all. 8.5 hours out of Newfoundland, another sunrise. It's rising out of the red of battle, this sun. But 40 more B-17s, 3 minutes apart, have roared across the Atlantic night. The Irish coast looks up to say, top of the morning. And a lake in the Ulster Highlands gives the navigator a checkpoint. Off the Scottish coast, Dernya Craig is a signal for right rudder south, across the English Midlands. Pilots are impatient with the lack of sleep. Atta boy, pour on the coal, let's get there. Different when the wings carried swastikas instead of these big white stars. Don't worry, folks. We're dropping nothing today, just our hats in the ring. Hello, Missy. We brought something for you and Brother. Chewing gum and chocolate bars. And there's a crate of oranges in the ball turret. Ah, there, Grandpa. We'll be seeing you for a glass of that. And there's the base. 400 acres of dispersal areas. The RAF is on hand to welcome us. Set her down, Colonel. Set her down. The 351st becomes part of the 8th Air Force. We've reached the battlefront. The combat crews move into English barracks. They give them those simple, quiet names for which Americans are famous. Later, the ground crews arrive. Hiya, Gus. Great boat trip, huh? Only 7 days and without any escort, too, See any submarines? Oh, 100 of them, huh? Well, I guess you ought to know, Gus. They tell me you was hanging over the rail all the way. Next day, big doings. Class A uniform. Shine those buttons. His Royal Highness, the Duke of Gloucester, brother to the King of England, drops in and is greeted by the old man. What's up? Sergeant Major says the RAF is handing over the field to us.
On behalf of the Air Ministry, I hand over this aerodrome complete with buildings and equipment for your safekeeping.
It gives me great pleasure to accept this station on behalf of the United States Army Air Forces.
RAF, if we can fit your boots, we'll walk it straight, brother. Another surprise visitor, General Arnold himself, doing a world inspection flight. He tells you you've got a tough assignment. This is one head man who knows and doesn't kid you. We have the privilege to meet General Aker, Commanding General, 8th Air Force.
Hi, Mr.
Yeah, glad to see you. How are you coming to this camera training film of yours?
Well, it's a little early to tell yet, sir, but we're turning a camera on everything and everybody.
Well, I know what General Arnold had in mind in having you make this gunnery picture. Captain Gable, our gunners are already the best in the business. But if they were only 10% better, it'd cost the Germans another 100 fighters a month.
So fire away, gunners. Plenty more practice before that first mission. His sleeve is a forked wolf. Track him. If you don't, he might get you, and you might have to bail out. Over the channel, perhaps. But if you do, a Spitfire of the Air Sea Rescue Service is bound to spot you. A stubborn, tough gang, this outfit. They'll go after you any time, any place. They picked up men 3 miles off the French coast with Heine defense batteries screaming, "No, you don't." Their answer is always, "Sorry, old boy, we will." Work on your identification of aircraft. Over here, it's with the real McCoy, such as this captured Ju-88. Well, there it is. Everything up forward, punched under the nose. But the Canadian pilot says it's a sweet flying ship. Yes, sir. A dangerous all-purpose aircraft. Or the Heinkel 111K. A bad hombre, but he makes good airplanes, gentlemen. These will be a happy sight in days to come. Your fighter escort, that big barrel nose job, circled in white, your own American P-47, the Thunderbolt, side by side with a graceful spit. These are what you don't shoot at. You hear daily lectures on security given by Major Scott, your Scotch-born intelligence officer.
Let's stop kidding ourselves. This flying field is only 20 minutes from the battlefront. The dumb spies have all been shot. The smart ones are still living. And you will run into one of them tonight at the Red Lion pub.
And if you go to the pub,
remember, £1 is not $1, but $4. And that equals 20 shillings. 1 shilling equals 12 pennies, which equals 20 cents. 1 English penny equals 2 American pennies. And don't throw your pennies around. Major, seems to me the paper in this pound is not very durable. What do you mean durable? I've had this one for 20 years.
What is it, Fred? What is it? One of those bitter lessons you learn in training. Flying close formation in rough air at low altitude is no good, gentlemen. Save that for high altitude, when you're headed for the target. Next morning, we crawl out of the sack to find Britishers on the field again. Big Halifax bombers that had blasted Berlin during the night. Their own field was closed in by weather, so they dropped in on us for breakfast. Say, Percy, how's the yak-yak over there? Rough? Oh, not half bad, Ying. Well, cheerio, lads. Thanks to the M&As. So long, Percy, old boy. We'll be finding out for ourselves one of these days. That day arrives. The order comes over the teletype. The communications clerk carries it to Colonel Milton, operations officer. To Colonel Burns, deputy commander. The old man is on the phone. Then in the briefing room.
I'm summarizing. Remember, you route in to this DR point where you go northeast to avoid this black area. T-47s will escort you to about this point on the way in, and Spit 9s will meet you about here on the way out and escort you all the way home.
And now the weather officer. Weather's plenty important.
You'll probably have to go over and above the altitude that you're scheduled to fly, 23,000 feet. From the IP to the target, the winds will be very strong tailwinds, and your ground speed should be, well, about 260 miles an hour. The visibility is good everywhere east of that cold front, and the temperature at the target should be comparatively warm, minus 25 degrees centigrade.
Today is your baptism of fire. If Lieutenant Argyropoulos ever felt responsibility, he feels it now. In the armament shop, his crew is picking up their guns.
Now remember, fellows, don't let them get too close trying for a sure kill. Your main job is to bring these airplanes back. You got plenty of ammunition. Keep them out there at long range.
Oh, we know. They've given you an easy hop. Only 3.5 hours in and out. What they call a milk run. But you'll remember this first mission. You don't admit it now. You wouldn't show it for the world. But later you find out everybody else felt the same way you did. Flash order from Wing headquarters. Wing wants 3 more ships added to the high group. 3 more bomb bays have to be loaded. You have to step on it. Positions in the formation change. Doesn't concern Sergeants Kenny and Phil Hulls. Gunners think only of smooth-working guns and plenty of ammunition. Ammunition's cheap. 6 cents worth of .50 caliber wanged into the cockpit of a Messerschmitt. That's what will bring you home. What did that weatherman say? 30 below over the target? Electrically heated suits. The Air Corps dresses for every occasion. Yes, everything has to be right, brother. Check everything. Every strap tight. Every buckle set. Everything understood. You get into your flak suit. Mighty heavy material, but it wears well, the man says. A thermos of hot coffee. The joker who brings it says it'll help keep you awake. Art straps on his throat mic. Over this intercom system, he'll be able to talk to every man in the ship. And they can talk to him. They'll be talking for keeps today. Well, that flare from the tower ought to be along any minute now. There it is. Start engines. The colonel's already been on missions with seasoned outfits. Today, he leads you on your berth. Second flare. Start taxi. Punch wing to wing at the start of the runway. Easy now, slow. You'll cut somebody's tail off. Rev her up and ride those brakes hard, Brett. Roger. You keep your eye on the tower. Take off. The old man leans full on his throttle. At 15-second intervals, you follow. Over the feet. You're on your way. The rest of the outfit sits down to wait.
Go ahead, Mike. Your deal. Come on, I cut.
Oh, okay. What time are they due back, do you know?
Scotty said around 5:20.
Gosh. I sure hope they all...
Hey, how many are you dealing? I'm in.
Oh, sorry.
We know, Mike. Everybody's sweating them out.
You mean what's coming over those trees, Major? No, that's not them. Just a flock of crows.
I was a truck driver on Canal Street, but I never felt like this before.
I ride the ambulances. I gotta be casual. You know, carefree and easy, like the doc.
Listen, wise guys, talk to us. The ground crew for each ship. We'll tell you how to feel.
Okay, here they are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 13, 14. That's the stuff. 17, 18, 19, 20. Here's the old man and Jenny. Yeah, that's your ship, Corporal. You can uncross those fingers now. 627. That's Joe Frischholz. A little hot, Joe, but you're a hot pilot. Here's Cagle at 742. Chalk him up. Here's old Zip at 879. He's got number 4 prop feather, too. Here's 953 with number 2 out. And look, Jim couldn't get his bomb bay doors closed either. The old OK sign, huh, Sergeant? Must have laid him right on the nose. Yeah. Oldie says he saw him land right on the MPI. Nice bombing, Steve. That's from me, Pete Provenzale, your navigator. Okay, Phil. Chalk up number 1. Nice driving, Captain Arge. You sure know your evasive action. Harry caught something. A 20 millimeter right across his radio. Arge looks at a hole in the horizontal stabilizer. Nothing at all. Hi, Pete. Come on, let's stow these guns and get to interrogation. Yeah, you're feeling pretty cocky. Nobody blames you. It's great to get that first one over with. But this one was pretty easy, remember? We got a lot more to go. Longer ones, tougher ones. Take it easy, boys. Take it easy. Back from the raid comes Major Louis Nowak, Group Surgeon. Doc flew this first mission to study the physical reactions of men in combat. He didn't have to go, but that's the kind of a doc he is. And today, on the walls of the officers' mess, begins the chronological record of the group's success. Coutray, a German fighter base in Belgium. Annie doesn't live there anymore. In the meantime, we find Kenny and Phil cleaning their guns in front of the armament shop.
Hello, Captain. Hello, fellas. Well, how was it?
You know, Cap, I don't think those Germans like that.
Are you ready to go again? Sure. Got to get this thing over. Did you learn anything you didn't know before?
Plenty. At home, they told us the Jerry's made most of their attacks on the tail. Today, most of them are on the nose.
Yeah, most of the time I had my turret pointed at 12 o'clock. I must have fired 1,000 rounds.
Let's go all these guns, Ken. All set?
Yes, check those guns. You had plenty more use for them the next 2 weeks. Emden, Kiel, Wilhelmshaven, St. Nazaire, Bremen. And every swastika stands for a Hun pilot that asked for it and got it. Came days when enemy targets were hidden by weather. So the more energetic of you found relaxation in peaceful combat. While the more studious men discussed tactical charts and maps, or something.
We'll give this pound to Ken. Yes.
But the more cultured of the group, like Kenny and Phil, went into the nearby villages to visit the quaint old cathedrals, churches and shops in the English countryside surrounding us. Or on days when they were confined near the base, the old cathedrals and shops would come out to see them. This little shop wants to go home. Meanwhile, back at the kitchen, we find a very unhappy and angry man.
Hello, Sergeant Posey.
Hello, Captain Gable.
What's this? I thought you were a ball turret gunner.
I thought so too, sir, but I've been grounded.
Oh, your past crept up on you, huh?
Yes, sir. They found I was chef at the Brown Derby in Hollywood, and now they have me in the mess making the cake tonight for the officers' party.
Nothing you can do about getting back into combat?
I don't think so, Captain.
Well, Sergeant, remember this. There are 2 kinds of cake. One of them's good, and the other one, I'll be seeing.
But gals or parties, you're still fighting a war. And you're getting mighty good at it. Nobody knows it better than the sucker who started it. Little Adolf.
Well, Sergeant Posting, back into combat, huh?
Yes, sir.
How'd you manage?
Well, sir, you know what you said. There are 2 kinds of cake.
So Poste's back in the air with you. You're blowing factories and power plants 1,000 feet in the air.
Okay, how about you, Winchester?
Don't have a little excitement.
Why not?
I have a little present here for you.
What's that, black?
Came in the side of the radio room and hit the buckle on my parachute. It's down on the floor.
Who had this plane? Phil. What time was that?
It was about $1,500.
$1,500. Where'd it happen?
You know, that's what it happened.
Well, you know, it's right here, just east of Athens. That's right. We'll confirm that. I saw it. I confirmed it. After he fired it, came down and passed underneath her left wing and exploded right underneath her. Nobody just bailed out.
And when you hand out punishment like this, you've got to take some, too. The day you got back from over Villacoublay, just outside of Paris, was plenty rugged. Signal flares. That means wounded aboard. What's tough about it was, you had to bring your bombs back. You couldn't drop them. When you reached the target, you found it closed over by weather. That's an order when you're flying over France. No indiscriminate bombing. Just German installations. The raid is a tired, sick guy this day, and nobody blames him. He had to fight his way 3 hours in, 3 hours out, under constant attack by over 200 Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs. He lost men, he lost ships, and couldn't strike his blow. That's rough. Here's Peter Provenzale. Remember him? Ard's navigator? Today he got a 20 millimeter through the leg. Control cable shot in two. But some wounded gunner wouldn't quit. He tied them together. Who's in there? Both waist gunners, huh? The docs are working on them now. One's pretty bad. Bulletproof glass. Well, Sergeant, guess you live right. Yes, the bombardiers with their first aid kits had plenty of work today, crawling back through the bomb bays, trying to keep a steady hand in the rough going. Many of your pals left you that day. Another loading. But if you happen to catch one in the wrong place, they've got a pretty nice repair shop. Ever see a sergeant flip a tulip in a lieutenant's face? Well, you just did. Yeah, while the gang at the base carries on, you can take it easy for a while. How's the fighting, Sarge? Nice fat fight, huh? This one's been stretched a little. We drop in on Lieutenant Bob Wallace to see how he's doing.
How you feeling? Great. I'll be out of here in a couple of weeks. Oh, Miss O'Neill, it's Captain Gable.
How do you do, Captain Gable?
How do you do, Miss O'Neill? Wally, I never got a chance to ask you. Tell me just what happened when you got hit.
Well, we'd left the target and we were on our way home. We got to the coast and we had our guns stowed away. A couple of FWs snuck up on us and gave us a good burst.
Oh, I see. You had your guns stowed away, huh?
That's right.
That's a little early, wasn't it?
It certainly was.
It's not a very good idea to relax over here until you get back to your own base. Is that right?
That's right.
Well, go ahead. Then what happened?
Well, after I got hit, I climbed down out of the pilot's compartment and got the top turret gunner to help me down into Bombay. He gave me some first aid, put the tourniquet on my leg, and took a good job of it.
Well, that's fine. I guess you think it's a good idea for these combat crews to have first aid training then, is that right?
I sure do.
Yeah. So, Wally, what do you think of the B-17s? Your instruments, your guns, and all the rest of the equipment they're giving you to fight this war with?
It's the best equipment in the world.
That's good. Say, I hear you got your Purple Heart, too.
Yes, Colonel Kendall was in the other day and gave it to me. I was more nervous than when those FWs were diving on him.
Well, outside of that, are they treating you all right around here?
Did you hear that, Miss O'Neill?
Wally's doing okay. Back at the base, they repair your ships, too. The busiest legs in the outfit belong to Major Ace Aiken, the S-4.
This airplane's got to fly in the morning. It's going to be ready?
So, Major? I don't know, sir.
Well, let's have no ceremony. Let's get the fans turning.
Keep the fans turning. The slogan of the ground crew. They work hard, these boys. They work 90 hours straight without sleep. But your ship is their baby, and she's got to fly. And if you need to repair a few thoughts, Sunday's always a nice day for it, if there's no raid scheduled. What do you know, kid? This church was built 900 years ago. Over at the hospital, Father O'Connor celebrates the Mass. The boys receive Holy Communion. Here's Pete Provenzale. He's leaving the hospital tomorrow. Back to work. The 351st is still flying, Adolf.
Attention to orders. General orders number 93. Headquarters 8th Bomber Command. 11th July, 1943.
You can't get out of it, you know. They pin medals on you for this sort of work. It's not so much a thrill for you, it's a big kick it will hand the folks back home. The Silver Star, the Distinguished Flying Cross, the Soldier's Medal. Dad and Ma and that certain girl. They'll cut out the clippings and drive the neighbors nuts. Bombardier Stevens, the DFC, because he's been batting 1,000 over Germany. And one to Pilot Peters. He had to ditch in the channel, but his coolness and courage saved his crew. Bill Howells gets 2 clusters on his air medal for straight shooting. The DFC to Tim Tutchin. A focke wolf and a mountain lion? No difference, he says. The control wires were shot in 2. So the DFC to Sergeant Del Conte, who tied them together, his hands punctured with flak. A silver star finds itself next to Provenzali's Purple Heart. He refused first aid till the Jerry fighters quit and stuck to his gun. The day the group led the wing over Schweinfurt, Colonel Hatcher was air to him, the Silver Star. And the DFC to Kenny Hull. Colonel Gross is smiling because Kenneth was having a Coke in the PX when his name was called. Are you forgetting your 5 confirmed Jerry, Sergeant? We're not. And they don't forget you when you're a little battle-weary and need a rest. At a very gay seaside community, a world-famous resort hotel has been converted for your pleasure by the Red Cross. A great place here. Sleep, eat, or what have you. Hey!
Not on your life, Clark. None of that here.
Oh, but look, Arch, just a few shots.
Oh, we're here for a rest. Right, you guys?
Right. Well, all right, then how's this? I'll follow them around with a silent camera for 1 day. They won't have to say a word. Good deal?
Good deal.
An English Surrey with a fringe on top. Nice fringe. Carry you to the old swimming hole. Let down your flaps and slide in. Now let's see what the boys back at the base are doing. Why, they're getting a few laughs, too. We'll let the man who's handing them out tell you about it.
Hello, everybody. This is Bob, somewhere in good old Jolly Hope, laying a few eggs for the boys that really know how to lay them. Yes, sir, this is one of the happier cow pastures that we worked in over there in England. And look who's dancing. You know, I used to dance with Fred Astaire when we couldn't get girls. And right here you see Jack Pepper, through here through the courtesy of his draft board. This picture's a little dark, I understand, but after we were there a couple of weeks, we got a little braver and we started to work with the lights on. This is really a great, great crowd out there tonight. And I understand Rhett Butler is on the fringe of the crowd. They tell me that they stopped him from flying in those B-17s. They claimed his ears held the plane back. Nice little scene. Shows Pepper trying to get his expense money. Look at that mob. You should have heard him cheer when Francis Langford walked out and when Tony Romano played the guitar. Yes, sir, you'll never know how this bunch of boys picked up our morale.
And again, the weather breaks over the continent, and the handwriting on the wall spreads your story. You're into the 3rd panel now. You've been out 8 days in a row and done a doubleheader over France on the 9th. This man's Air Force is piling it on. New combat wings have been added. New air divisions formed. So you're not very surprised when General Aker comes that day. Something big is up. He goes into the briefing room to confer with the old man and his staff. They call in the squadron commanders, even the flight commanders. What did he tell them? Your 4 squadron COs, they know, but don't talk. Just grin a little with excitement. It's something big, all right, because the bomb dumps have been getting plenty of heavy stuff lately. And a loading order came through this afternoon. Stand by. More than that, wing racks. We're really going to pile it on. And that night, as always, when you know a real dilly is coming up, you're a little restless. Out in the dispersals, you hear them winding up those engines. That's all right, ground crew. Make 'em sing. Make 'em sing good.
All right, you guys. Breakfast at 3, briefing at 4.
Okay, man. For security's sake, anyone know what the target is for today? St. Nazaire? Russell?
Harris.
Oh, we'll see. All right, Sergeant.
Sprechen Sie Deutsch?
This was the longest penetration for this group. We've got an A+ target over here. We've got to get it today. Okay, gentlemen. Stations are at 5:05. Start engines 6:05. Taxi at 6:15. Takeoff 6:30. Got it? That's all. Okay, man. Let's go get this target, and then we'll take the jet. Check in your station. At the designated splicer point, still over friendly territory, you rendezvous with other groups. Your combat wing banks into position. Then wing after wing, as far as the eye can believe, the attack forms. It heads for its assigned targets 500 miles away. Up until this moment, your fighter escort is still on the ground, guarding its limited fuel capacity. Now flight control gives the signal to the Thunderbolts. They climb upstairs to overtake you.
Fighters, 3 o'clock low. Watch it. That should be our escort. You're right, sir. 47s. Pilot to crew. Pilot to crew. Over enemy coast. On the ball, you guys. that slag. Can't they throw it any higher than that? Where do you want to have it? In a bomb bay? Why don't you lean out and smell it?
That's right, you guys. Laugh it off. Right now, a bum joke goes better than 2 fingers of rye. Around 3 hours out, Arge looks at his watch. He knows it's time for the fighter escort to turn back. From all over the ship, you watch them leave. You're really on the ball now, because you know that enemy fighters will appear any minute. They know exactly where you are. They've been watching the stratosphere condense off your wingtips, giving you away in long trails of magnificent treachery.
Okay, here they are. 9 o'clock high, enemy fighters. Same thing at 3 o'clock.
Yes, at least those vapor trails work both ways. Arch watches the enemy formations as they parallel your course. Seems obvious. They're staying out of range, going out ahead to turn in for a frontal attack high. All turrets swing about to help guard the rear. Top turrets hunt the sky above in all directions. There's some more out there. Keep your eyes peeled. Now it comes. The enemy pours in at you from every point on the dial.
Level. 2 more. 5. Watch it. Get that one at 3. High. Level. No, he's going low. Here he comes up. Smoking on number 4. He's going out and down. Check the chute, you guys. One chute out of the tail. 2 out of the waist. The other 2 boys out of the nose. There's 2 more. Pilot to tail. Pilot to tail. Let me know how they're doing back there. Roger. Fighter, 6 o'clock. Coming through. Yep, no chance there. Two 190s, high. Somebody got one of them on the button. That Jerry pilot bailed out. He's not walking away from it.
Barreling at you. A little short on heart, but plenty long on guts, this enemy. Another 17 hit. And again, you have to close the gap in the formation. And again, o'clock high, 4 o'clock level, out of the sun, and up from the ground.
Two more coming through. 5 o'clock.
Crossing another flak area. It's heavier this time, so black and thick you can almost hear it, and it's more effective.
Shorty's been hit, feather number 4. Cover them all you can, everybody. Pilot to left waist. There's another one working Shorty over. Can you help him? No can do, sir. Out of range.
Beginning of smoke screens announces the approach to the target area. The enemy's been caught off guard. He's trying to cover up. Too late. In desperation, through his own flak, the final Hun fighter makes a pass at the low squadron. Driven off, but still...
Did a fighter or a flak get that ship? Flak, I think.
There it is, the flare out of the lead ship. The signal for the bomb run. This is your attack.
All right, Steve. We're on the IP. She's yours. I got her. Bombay doors open. Run now, Steve. I'm on it.
Yes, make it count, bombardiers. They build these ships around you. Bombs away. The lead group picks out his MPI in the dock area. Let's go with the heavy stuff and the big incendiaries. The high group heads for the industrial section and hands out the same medicine. The low group turns for the adjacent airdrome. It blasts the field, the hangars, and repair shops with hundreds of deadly anti-personnel bombs. A nice pattern, bombardier. Good deal. Can't hear what's going on down there, 5 miles below you. But marshalling yards and chemical tanks, ships and warehouses, spare engines and ball bearing factories are disintegrating in molten chaos. It's thunder out of the Alleghenies, Adolf. You said Americans were soft and decadent? Well, here's a red, white, and blue headache that'll help you change your mind. target area. The smoke from its burning debris rises 16,000 feet into the air. More flak. The aim's still good down there. How about this trip home? Is it going to be rough?
Pilot to crew. Pilot to crew. Well, you guys, we're over an hour out, and they haven't come back at us yet. Looks like we're lucky this trip. Enemy fighters, 11 o'clock high. Another 1 o'clock high. Coming level to 3. W's, 8 o'clock high. You don't want it. ME, 110, 1 o'clock high. ME at 2 o'clock. I got him. I'll say you did. You're sailing out either. Another 110 at 10 o'clock. He's yours, Cam. There he goes. He's the pigeon.
Stoffel commanders throw their pilots into formation with suicide orders. That's what they get. Formation is tighter than ever. You're not sparing ammunition. You're knocking them down like mallets. One more. And another. Another. 2 in a row for the boys up forward.
That's mine. You see him, Ken? Sure do. I'll confirm him all right.
Get this 110. Pull her up, Art. Pull her up.
FW, 3 o'clock. Take to him, Joe. Hold your fire on that 190. That's a spit on its tail. Yeah, our fighter cover's good here. Out of port spit. Gee! I tail it, Jerry. It's over the deck, pal. Look at that spit right him down. Oh, you sweetheart. Good night, sweetheart. Till we meet tomorrow. Good night, sweetheart. Sleep will banish sorrow.
Your shadow on the undercast. The pilot's rainbow. Mission's end, but not the end of the battle. Fighting men from Maine to California still have a long, tough rainbow to travel. But they're looking the enemy right between his eyes. They're fighting him the American way, their American way of life. Enemy of America, look at these men. They're not going to lose, brother.
At an 8th Air Force fighter base on the invasion coast of England, the commander of a combat wing pins DFCs on Thunderbolt pilots. They won those medals in the Battle of Germany, escorting our bombers to their targets. Ramrod is the fighter's name for an escort job, and a ramrod begins at Bomber Command. The route and the plan for the job comes over the scrambler phone into the combat ops room at Fighter Command. The time is late afternoon, October 1st, 1943, and the mission is Ramrod to Emden tomorrow. Let's draw it on the maps, have a look at the job. It's to be a big deal, almost 400 bombers. And here's their route into the target and out again, 300 miles and more each way. And where do they want fighter cover? Where are the rendezvous points? That's the key to a ramrod job. And so the details are sorted out and boiled down into the field order by A3. The deal is all wrapped up, but still General Kepner, fighter commander, must check before he gives the final okay that releases the whole complex machinery of another attack in the Battle of Germany. From fighter command through fighter wings, the field order goes by teleprinter. And finally, at about 2100 hours, the order clatters over the printer at the base of the 56th Fighter Group. The same ramrod order reaches the group ops room. And here is where words are translated into a weapon, translated into the ramrod to Emden. First, draw down the bomber route to the target and home again. And then the route of the Thunderbolts of the 56th Group. And all important, the rendezvous point and the rendezvous time. Always that emphasis on time, because time is gasoline, and gasoline may make the difference between success and failure of this mission. 90 seconds is your margin for error at the rendezvous point. But in those 90 seconds, a whole group of fortresses can be wiped out if fighters miss the rendezvous. Early on the morning of October 2nd, the S2 officers prepare the maps for briefing the pilots who will fly to Emden. In this room, the attack order that began at Bomber Command completes its journey down in the fighter group. In another Nissen hut, a group operations officer reaches for the telephone.
Briefing at 13:30 hours. Got it?
Briefing at 13:30 hours. Roger.
It's a belly tank job, so get 'em on.
And the same order goes out to the ops officers of the other squadrons in the 56th Thunderbolt Group. And in each squadron now, the pilots are taking it easy. And they know a job is cooking. And take it easy now, boys, because soon the tension begins. And soon the pilots will know which names are down for each team on today's ramrod to Emden. Each squadron commander knows his men, and wise as a football coach, he lines up his team, flight by flight. Out around the field, the ground crews put on the belly tanks that the Thunderbolts will need today to do their job. The name of this slugger is Little Cookie, and the two crosses record the Huns that have been blown to kindling by the 8 guns in the wings of these rugged fighters. Two things these fighters can do better than any Hun. They can dish it out, and they can take it. And they have to do plenty of both. The guns are loaded, the tank is on, and finally the gas, the precious gas. Back at headquarters, the Group CO studies the job in the ops room. A veteran of more than 80 missions, he knows full well what these lines on the map mean to planes and pilots. Like a Toscanini or a Benny Goodman, he must absorb and memorize the music because he leads the job today. And next, let's check with Stormy, the weather officer. Over the sea to landfall, 6/10 cloud at low altitudes. The Dutch island should be open for a landmark, but expect an overcast in the target area. The wind clocks at 110 miles per hour at 30,000 feet from the west. So get down low coming home or you might not get home. And then the S2 officer checks the flak map. Those red areas up there on the Dutch coast spell danger. Anti-aircraft guns are down below that reach up to 30,000 feet, so look out. And now in the briefing room, the S2 officers and the ops officers wind up the job of laying out today's mission on the large-scale map. And outside now, from scattered corners of a station that is sprawled all over the English hills, carefully dispersed to guard against sneak raiders, the 50 or more pilots who will go out today in Thunderbolts arrive at the briefing shack on battered bicycles and some in the always reliable Jeep. If it weren't for the bikes and the Jeeps, you'd have to spend half of each day just walking between the places you have to go on the average fighter station in Britain. The bomber crews were briefed hours ago for today's ramrod to Emden. A fighter briefing is plenty serious. 50 or more pilots for the day's job file into the briefing hut, and there they sit down. The CO comes in, and the briefing begins.
Well, here it is. The big friends are pasting Emden today. We're to give fighter cover from Zood Camp over the target and back out again to the sea and then part way home. The 56 will lead the show in. We escort the lead box of bombers. We've got to give them head-gun cover. Nothing must break through. The 4th Fighter Group covers the tail of our task force, and there should be over 100 of us. The B-17s will be in 3 boxes of 60 each, altitude 25,000 feet. The course home is 249 degrees magnetic. And remember, our rendezvous with the bombers is at 1548 at Zood Camp. They'll be to the north of us. Start engine at 1443. Take off 1449 to 1458. Set course 1503 at 3,000 feet. Course out 80 degrees. Target 89 degrees 1600. Course back 249. Land at 1722.
Carefully on the back of his hand, each pilot writes down the dope on the day's job. And now back to the CO again.
My wingman, White 2, will relay messages and work on the bomber channel. For the takeoff, I will lead the 61st off runway 5. The 62nd will queue up on runway 6. After I take off, the 63rd will move into position and be ready to shove as soon as the runway is cleared.
And now the dope on the enemy flak and fighters for the day's job from the S2 officer.
A flak map shows you where you may have trouble today. Heavy flak around Emuden and Amsterdam and over the target, so open up. Stay out to sea on the way home. German fighter strength is heavy here. Look out for twin-engine rocket ships. They'll be below you. Keep your eye out for them and don't let them through to the bombers.
And now the dope on the weather. Weather will be important today. because the bombers are going to hit the Hun through heavy cloud. And the weather officer takes over the briefing now.
You'll see just about enough ground today to know the Earth is down below. The target area and the whole stretch of the Zuider Zee and Holland will be pretty well covered. The front over to the west of us won't affect the base for your return. There'll be scattered cloud. Winds above are 110 miles per hour at 250 degrees. Contrails will persist at 31,000.
And now, with the time check, the briefing will come to an end. This moment is dramatic in its tension and important. 4,000 men will be in the air on this ramrod to Emden. All 4,000 must be synchronized to the second. Okay, boys, good hunting. Jeeps will carry pilots to the planes. In England, as in Burma or in Italy, general mud hangs to your feet. And like everything else in every army, the Jeep must carry twice the load it was designed to do. "54 pilots ride out to 54 planes. None of them know what lies ahead. But they aren't worried because so far this group has shot down Huns at the rate of 4 for 1. The crew chief helps the pilot into his chute. And crew chiefs worship their planes and their pilots. And they always say, "Good luck, sir, see you later." And sometimes they may say, "How about lending me £1 until tomorrow, boss?" And now the time for start engine years. Six minutes after the first engine starts, the first squadron must begin the takeoff. 7 minutes later, all 54 planes must be airborne. Crew chiefs ride the wings to guide the pilots into the tight-packed lineup on the runways. Remember, no seconds can be wasted now. These Thunderbolts will need every thimble of gas to get to the target and fight and then get home again today. There goes the flare, and there goes the first pair, like sprinters at the starter's gun. The leader will fly 3 miles out, make a slow turn, and then before he finishes a half turn of the field, the 16 planes of his squadron plus 2 spares must be airborne and in position. The first squadron is off and the second gets away from the other runway. The third squadron moves into readiness where the first squadron took off 2 minutes ago. One slow climbing turn, all 3 squadrons will assemble and form into a huge V. The lead squadron in the center, the spearhead. The flights fly in a 4-ship V, 8 aircraft operating as a section. The trailing section flying 500 feet above the other. The 2 spares of each squadron straggle behind. Now the whole group sets course on 80 degrees. A slow climb to the Dutch coast, then open up into battle formation. And 3 hours from now, home again if you're lucky. From other fields, other fighter groups take off, Thunderbolts and Lightning. In the Battle of Germany, a fighter's first, last, and only job is to protect the bomber. Thunderbolts must climb to high cover positions above the bomber, climb slow and compact, and then open up. Each squadron to its planned position. Throttles are kept pretty well forward, so fighters must weave in orbit to cover the slower bombers. Sometimes our fighters will pull out 5 miles ahead to break up the frontal attack by the Huns. The Thunderbolts operate like interference in football, taking out the tacklers. While they are still climbing, the fighters stay in close. Then it's wide open. The throttles are blasted forward as the combat begins. Bandits are sighted and begin their slashing attacks through the bomber formations, and the Thunderbolts are on top of the attackers. See those 2 flares? Green, green, distress signal. A bomber needs help. And here come 2 Thunderbolts. There goes what was a Hun. The other pair of the flight. And now a snaky string of lightnings moves into the battle. They are the fighters that cover the bombers on deepest penetrations into Germany. Remember this, you can outdive anything you'll meet in the Battle of Germany. Keep on his tail and in the end you'll get him. one wide open and you gotta reef it in. Watch these Huns. The single-engine jobs always hit the fortresses from the front. Going into the bombing run, you've really got to protect the bombers, because they've got to fly straight and level through flak and fighters to get their bombs onto the pinpoint targets down below. The opening of the bomb bays is the signal for the bandits to press home their attacks. The bandits know that the forts and libs cannot take evasive action until their bombs are away. The bombardier must forget his nose guns now and concentrate on that bomb site. Through cloud or clear skies, those eggs must go down and find the target. And it's up to you to help the bombers lay those eggs on targets like these. And now the battle moves on. On some missions, all the bombers go for a single target. On other days, several task forces will hammer different targets. Fresh fighter group moves into the scramble. It's hammer, hammer, hammer every mile of the way. Twin-engine Huns come up now with their long-range rocket guns. Watch this explosion. That was a Rocketeer. After all the bombs are away, the forts and libs must fight their way home again. That's not easy, because many of them are cripples now. And now is when fresh fighter groups speed into the battle to help their big friends get back to Britain. across the sky that mean fresh fighter strength. Brother, the battered bombers are plenty glad to see it. You see the whole story in these contrails. The broad mass trails are where the bombers turn for home. And there are the single streaking trails that show how the thunderbolts weave above the homing bombers as top cover. Look at that fort's tail. A 20 millimeter chewed it off. Bombers are bound to get it. There goes one of the big boys spinning down. Some of the fighters get it too. There's the single shoot of a Thunderbolt pilot floating down. Many of the men shot down over Germany are still alive, prisoners of war. Black smudges of the flak that come up from the anti-aircraft guns below. Battle stays hot as ever through flak and fighters as the forts move on and on to the coast. Sometimes the battle goes on halfway across the channel. Welcome is the sight of the coast of England. But even then, the battle is not ended, because crippled planes must still be landed, and often that is not easy. The battle-damaged fighters limp home to land ahead of their group. Watch this landing. His right tire is shot away. Hold it. And at last, he's down. And now a group of Lightnings land. The 56th group comes home. Flight after flight will peel off. A new flight moves into peel-off position as each proceeding flight goes into the approach. Hurry, because gas is low. The first are down in close order. They must clear the end of the field as fast as possible. Taxis to its own hard standing, widely dispersed around the field. pilots to their planes. Now take them back to the interrogation. A pretty happy bunch. They got 4 Huns and lost none of their own planes today. Now, this is the Thunderbolt group that swore back last April that they would knock down 100 Huns by Armistice Day, and they made it, with 2 to spare. The S-2 officer, the pilots call him the spy, conducts the interrogation. It's a lot different from the last time they were together, when they were tense and expectant at briefing. The spy will ask, well, how about the rendezvous? And Gabby, a squadron leader, will reply, we hit it on the nose, 1558 at Zood Camp. And then the spy will say, okay, and now for the claims. How many Huns did you get today? Well, I blasted one Farquhar at that island. He took plenty of lead, but he went down. And then another one. I parked him on a cloud. Nice shooting, brother. And how about our big friends? Did anybody see any bummers go down? Yeah, I saw one. 6 guys bailed out. Any more claims? Yeah, I got one of those rocket carriers. He tried to get away, but I nailed him. And so it goes. Another ramrod comes to an end. It's been a good one. Only 4 bombers were lost today. Thanks to the fighters. Bottoms up, the hunting was good.